All right. So we've got the live stream going. I'm just going to give this just a couple seconds here to get caught up. Hope everybody's having a good day, a good week so far. How's everybody doing? You guys excited for some Maya? I know you guys all obviously signed up for computer animation, so it was probably a pretty exciting class. Finally getting into the one where you're using Maya, creating your 3D shapes, setting up some lights. We got a bunch of really cool stuff planned for you guys later in the month too, like doing lights and renders. We'll talk about Nuke a little bit, but it should be pretty good. If you guys could do me a favor and just verify that you can hear my audio. Just want to check that before we get too deep into this thing and I start lecturing to nobody. Which has happened before. I've done a lecture and I realized 15 minutes in, nobody could hear me. Sweet. All right. So I think in the last class, you guys were probably doing your meetings, I think through GoToTraining. I don't know if this is the first time you guys have done like one of the live lectures or meetings in YouTube. So it's a little different. I just kind of like the platform of YouTube because it's very accessible to everybody. I can post a link, on Discord, and even people from other classes can still pop in and like join us if we want, which is kind of cool actually because what you guys could do is later on, if you ever just want like a random refresher, or you maybe like you're on Discord just working on something and you want to like pop in and see what we're doing, even if it's like 6-7 months from now, you guys are always more than welcome to pop into the live session at any point and hang out and kind of see what we're doing in the class. But I do want to kind of go over a few things with you guys first, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page as far as like how the class is structured. Because again, I think this is a little different than probably we've had some where. Oh, looks like my stream's buffering real quick. There we go. Where we're kind of like shuffling things around to make the weekly setup a little bit easier for people to follow along with it. So the basic idea here for the way this class works is you're going to see there are 4 activities. The 4th one's going to be a survey. I don't think we're too worried about that. If you want to fill out the survey, fantastic. But for the other 3, where we have a software installation, and you guys, a lot of you have already installed Maya and done that. This is really just you making sure it's up to date. If for some reason you didn't install it previously, you still have an opportunity to do that, for the beginning of the week. Now, the point 2 activities for every week, you're going to notice that there's no waiting for this, but there is. Oh, well, there you go, John. Now you can hear me. So the point 2 has no waiting, and you're going to see that the point 3 is 15%. So usually for every week, there's a 10%, 0%, and 15%. And you might be wondering why we have a 0%. So what we're doing with the point 2 assignments is I'm basically using it just as a separate activity strictly for the live session, where I'm also using it as like an advertisement to just have a separate project where you guys can jump in here. We can all just kind of talk about some of the things we're doing this week. I can do a demonstration. If you guys have questions, I can try to like show off some different things you might be curious about in Maya, whether it's relevant to the project or not, something you want to learn about in the future. But everything you do in the live session, which is really just follow along, and if you want, you can look at some of the dive deeper stuff. These are really good playlists, by the way, especially this bottom one here. You're going to use information from the live session to assist you with point 3. So every week's the same thing. You have your point 1 primer, which is a little 10% weighted assignment. Point 2 is our live session where we kind of talk about stuff that we're going to need to know for the weekend. So when you do your point 3 that's due Sunday, all you're doing is really using the videos in point 3, but you're also going to use the stuff we talked about in the live session. And for anyone that obviously is not here, you're going to be able to watch the recording tomorrow, because I send out a recording of this a day later. So this will all be recorded if you want to review it. So typically what I do in the live sessions is I just cover some things that we need to know about for point 3, and I'll probably do a little demonstration on the activity. So that way, if you guys are maybe unsure what the documentation is referring to, we'll spend a good 20 minutes near the end kind of doing a quick dry run through the project, and I'll maybe do like a small bit of it just so you get the basic idea of what we're trying to accomplish this week. But yeah, I mean, the activities are all pretty straightforward. You got your YouTube playlists. Hopefully you guys know that you can pop these out, by the way, because these are really tiny in the LMS and you probably can't see anything. I'm hoping you guys realized that you can hit the little YouTube button to pop it out into a different tab. If you were unaware of that, surprise, that's something you can do. That'll make it easier for you just to see everything, because this poor LMS, it does an awful job scaling the videos properly. So you can always pop those out. And down here in the documentation, of course, you can click through this and just get a pretty good idea of what we're turning in. But all we're doing this week is getting you guys acclimated to Maya and talking about cameras. You're going to be making your first 3D cameras, super exciting, and just turning in a couple Maya files to the activity. All right, and if you guys have any questions as I'm going through this stuff, feel free to type it in there. I'll try to address it as we go. All right. What I'm going to do before we get into Maya is I really quickly want to run through a couple things that I really want you guys to try looking into today, if you already haven't, because I've been trying to talk to a couple of you individually, like one-on-one about the same thing, but I noticed there were so many people that I think are running into the same issues that I really want to like just kind of address it in the meeting and then make sure everybody can get this at once. All right, so by a show of hands, how many of you had issues with OBS, the recording software? Whether it was like the black screen or it wasn't running at all properly, or your computer's freezing constantly. There's a lot of like really random bugs that kind of happen when you first get your tech kit. And I don't know if it's really been explained properly on like how you can resolve a lot of these things. And the OBS one's a huge one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the OBS thing, like you can get a black recording. Yeah, Aspen, so you've got the same problem. Everyone almost runs into this every month. And I think what's happening is it's not actually OBS, it's your laptop, and OBS is having an issue communicating with the graphics card, trying to capture the information. So I just want to make sure we're all doing a couple things. So you know how, like in the bottom right corner, you guys have probably noticed that through your notifications, you occasionally get these little things that pop up where it's like, hey, there's an Adobe update, and then there's a Windows update, and like it'll kind of tell you there's these random things that are kind of like recommended that you do. And what I've noticed, like for me, when I first got my laptop, is that almost every single time I would click on an update, like an Alienware update or a Windows update, it would never actually do anything. And I started to realize that because I would kind of notice the same notification would pop up about like every week of the thing that I could have swore just was updated the week prior. And I realized what's happening is if I go to my update, so if I just type in updates down at the bottom, this is the Windows update. Some of you guys have maybe been in here before, possibly. This is the update thing that's built into your Windows operating system. And if you want, if you guys are watching this, you can totally just check it out right now with me. Like just go to the bottom of your laptop, hit the little search, type in updates, and go into this page right here. Go into this little settings window. What you're looking for is to see if this is up to date. Now, what happened with mine is this will actually say that it's not up to date. It's fine now, but it used to say it's not up to date. And when you check for updates, it would understand it's supposed to be updated, and it would never actually do it. I would get errors, I'd get connection problems, it would partially download and not finish, and it would keep acting like I never was able to update it over and over because this thing would never work. It's very, very frustrating. So to get around this problem, thankfully, there's a better way to do this. Check this out. And I have shown this to a couple of you already. In your browser, type in Windows 10 Update Assistant. Since I've done this, this has been a game changer. You're going to go to the first link on the page, okay? And then inside of here, you can read all this if you want, but in the first paragraph, you're going to see at the end it says, after you download the Update Assistant, that's all we care about. We're going to click. It's going to take you to a page, and all you have to do is hit update now. This is going to download the update assistant. So this is a separate application, and it might take a sec to download it. Mine is already set up as a shortcut on my desktop, and if you guys do the same thing, it's probably going to also make a shortcut on your desktop. But you double click it. I'll hit yes. Okay, and you can see it says thank you for updating to the latest version of Windows 10. Yeah, it went black in the recording there for a second, but it's not going to do that when you do it. Thank you for updating the latest version of Windows 10. If you guys load this thing and it doesn't say this, that means you actually are a version back. And I think what most of you guys are starting with is Windows 1903. The one that I'm running is 1909. And I could not get mine to update until I did it this way. And it took a while to get this to download because my computer was so far back when I first got it. So if you haven't done it, highly, highly recommended to do this weekend, today, as soon as possible. Get that out of the way, because once you've got it, you're going to be able to get all your Windows updates really quickly. This has been incredible. I don't know why the other update one doesn't work, but it's the way it is. The other thing I want you to do is after you go through the Windows one, once you know that's all up to date, and your computer might restart in the process of it trying to do all this, go down here, type in Alienware update. This is a different app. So this is an updating app for your Alienware softwares. So did you guys ever get this when you were in CAN 101? Like, was there any information about this when you were getting your tech kit? Or some of you maybe stumbled upon this on your own just because of like the notifications. I'm just curious if you guys have been in here before. But if you haven't, if you've never seen this before, this is a super critical thing to go into. Mine, it was pretty out of date when I first got it, and I had a couple students over the last few months that had no idea this was even a thing, and I was with them when they were hopping in here and trying to do the update, and it was like 20 things that needed to be updated. It was way, way back on updates. So you're going to do check. It'll tell you what you need to update. Let it run through the updates. This is basically going to be like graphics card drivers, firmware, BIOS, basically everything that kind of allows your hardware to communicate properly with each other and communicate to your operating system. I think this is the one that's partially causing some of the OBS issues. I think if this is out of date, it's leading to the black screen issue that's causing OBS not to record anything. So look into it. If you guys are up to date, you don't have to worry about this at all, but I just wanted to throw that out there just to make sure we're all good. And the last thing I want to show you as a fail-safe, as our other backup, here's my OBS. You guys are all using display capture. There is another one you can use as a backup. I'm not as crazy about it, but if you do a window capture, what this will do is you can actually pick, I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to mess up my live session, but if you hit OK, it'll let you pick the software you want to record. So because Maya is open behind it, if I hit OK, I'll be able to pick Autodesk Maya from a list, and it will record Maya. That one always seems to work. Even people that have the black screen recording issue can do it this way with the window capture. The only issue with the window capture is because it's only recording a software, not your full screen. That means if you ever have something like an Explorer window over the top, this actually won't show up in the recording. It'll show you what's behind it. Or if you have like a window in Maya open, like this is the Maya preferences, if this is open, this actually won't show up in the recording. So any floating windows that's not literally the default Maya interface won't show up in the recording. Now, it's not a huge issue for me because I can still kind of grade everything. So as long as you're explaining what you're seeing, this is still fine if you want to try it that way. So again, that is window capture. This is like our last resort if like everything else fails. And if that also doesn't work, I'm open to you guys like finding a completely different software. You can try Streamlabs OBS. This is another OBS software, Streamlabs OBS. You can try that one out. You can do Camtasia. There's a lot of other free ones out there. As long as I can see a video, it honestly doesn't matter to me if you're using OBS or not. So, but if you guys do have questions about any of that stuff, feel free to hit me up on Discord, and I will try to meet with you all individually to address the issue. But that's that. Okay. Well, that was fun. So now let's not talk about software updates. Let's talk about what we're here for. Maya. So what I'm going to do is go into 1.3. Okay. And inside of 1.3, our goal is to basically create some cameras. So down here you can see we have a zip file that we need to download our assets. We would download that. There's only going to be 2 files inside of it. So if you look at the documentation back here, we have our 2 Maya files and we have 2 reference images. So for the character Maya file, what you guys are going to try to do is, after going through the videos and the documentation, I just want to see if you guys can create your own camera and get something as close as possible to matching this reference. So it's more of like a just an image matching test. How close can you get your camera to match this one? Like as far as like the position, the way it's rotated, the framing of everything, how close can you get it? And you should be able to get it really close, because when you kind of read through this thing and you watch the videos, it will basically explain what all these things are, and a lot of you will probably get it spot on. This is usually a pretty successful little activity. And then for this one, for the other Maya file, you're still making cameras, but this one's a little different. I just wanted you guys to kind of have fun, not worry about trying to match reference. I want you to make your own cameras, make a good composition, go through the playlist, come up with something you think you might, is kind of interesting. As long as you're focused on the balcony, you could do a widescreen shot. You could say where it's symmetrical, where it's like centered, looking at the balcony. You could have like a top down. You could have a really close shot that's like where the camera is sitting on the ledge looking towards the door. I just want you guys to kind of have fun and be creative and just see what type of camera angles you can come up for this particular environment. So what compositions do you like? And if you end up making more than 2, that's fine with me. You can make as many as you want. And then all you're going to do is turn in the 2 Maya files, and I'm going to check it out Monday morning after the deadline, and I'll give you guys some feedback on how you did with the cameras. So let's try it out. All right. Now, when you guys start downloading your projects, what I would definitely recommend you do, if you haven't done it, so in your documents folder, have you guys all already started making like new custom folders for every class? Like when you guys were in CAN 101, did they have you set up like a CAN 101 folder? Or like maybe you had it named like the class name or something like that. If you haven't been doing this yet, I would start today. Like this month, make it a goal to go into your documents folder and just think of how you want to organize your work. So what personally I do is, because in my documents folder, I have all these other like folders that kind of relate to softwares, like my Camtasia recordings. I've got the Houdini software, my Adobe suite. You can see there's a Maya folder. I made a separate one for LA Film School. And then inside of that, what I'm doing is everything related to education for the LA Film School I have in here. And I'm breaking it down per class. So I have some stuff for Digital Painting 1, which is a different class. Oh, perfect. So if you already made one, that's amazing. I didn't know you guys were doing that. CAN 115, which is this class, that's shading and lighting. CAN 120, that's when you get to shading and lighting 2. So in a couple of months, you guys are going to be with me again for the second class. And inside of those folders, I made subfolders per activity. So you can see it's just per week, 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, over and over again, all the way through the end of the week. And then occasionally I might have other folders down here, which maybe don't apply to a particular activity, but it's something outside of that I need to like save. A lot of this is just stuff I need for like the LMS, where I'm like making my little live session images and stuff for the activities. But you guys will definitely want something like this. So in 1.3, we would have downloaded the Maya files. So back here, you guys will download this. You're going to unzip it. So you right click on the file, extract all. So make sure you're extracting the zip file. You do not want to work from stuff within a zip file. It's going to be very bad. extract it, and you're going to end up with a folder that looks kind of like, actually this one, this is what it's going to look like. 2 Maya files, 2 reference images. And you can see what the reference images look like. This is it. Front camera, 3/4 angle camera. These are the 2 that we're going to try to match. And then they go obviously with this file. And then this one right here is going to be the one where we just kind of make our own cameras and have fun. All right. So I've got Maya already open. So I'm in Maya 2019.2. If you guys are not running 2019.2, make sure you do go in there and try to update that at some point. If you go to your Autodesk account, the Autodesk account is so weird. This thing is also been very slow today. If you go in here under Manage Products and Downloads, I talk about this in one of my videos, but under All Products and Updates, right here, if the first time you guys did this, you may have noticed this is the only thing that was showing up is this A360 student. But you should see all the other guys now that you've already created your account. It usually takes about a day for this to update properly for some reason. But come down to Maya, and you should notice that you have 2019. And if you go to Updates and Add-ons, this is where you get 2019.2 for Windows right there. So that's the important one. If you guys are still running 2019, like the original, you're still okay for today. It's not like a big issue, but I would maybe do that when you have some free time, like some random night where you're not working on anything. Just like let it download, run the installation. It'll override the other 2019 automatically. It'd be good just to get that out of the way, so your Maya is a bit more up to date. And it's also going to fix a couple bugs that were in the very first version of 2019. And for anyone that's in 2020, you're probably okay. The only issue with 2020 is it's still very new, and I haven't tested everything, like all the projects with 2020. I don't think you're going to run into issues, but it's a little unknown. So if you want to be the guinea pig and try using Maya 2020, be my guest. I will use you as a test subject, and we're going to find out if everything works. But occasionally when you make have a new version of Maya, little things will break in here and there. I just haven't had a chance to go through everything with 2020 yet. All right. So back in Maya, let's just do kind of a really quick review on some of the very, very basic stuff that we talked about in 1.1. So we've got our viewport, right? And you guys remember all the simple navigation controls. We've got our Alt. And you remember me talking about this in the video where I said like your whole left hand is going to slowly turn into the claw, which is going to be terrible for carpal tunnel. But I have, looking at my hand right now on my keyboard, I have my index finger, like pointer finger on Alt. I have my ring finger on Shift, and occasionally I'll use my ring finger to hop down to the Control key. But they're all kind of like huddled in that corner, and the reason for that is because Control, Shift, and Alt inside of Maya are basically going to be part of all of your hotkeys. So you really want to make sure that your hand is very comfortable around that area, and not to mention too, not just like Control, Alt, Shift, but we also have like the Q, W, E, R keys, right? So all those hotkeys for like selection, move tool, which is W, E, rotate, R is scale. Those are all also in that same side of the keyboard. So if I made something like a cube, you know how you guys were doing it up here, like you did it in on the shelf, right? Here's our poly modeling shelf. Here's how I make a little simple polycube. I can hit F. So F as in frame or focus. If I click on an object and hit F, it'll zoom in my camera. So it's kind of like focusing on that particular object. And here's what it looks like. We're zoomed in, looks pretty good. And if I were to go through my hotkeys, W, E, R, W, E, R, you can see it's hopping between all those different tools. So move, rotate, scale. Move is going to be side to side, back and forth, up and down. If you grab in the middle, this is a free transform, which moves in all three at once. I really would recommend not doing that. I would try to use only one axis at a time while you're still getting used to moving things around. Doing this from the middle is a little tricky because you're oftentimes going to move something in the wrong spot and you don't quite realize it. Rotation, same thing. When you're rotating something, maybe for now, don't click in the middle. This is free rotation. See how I'm moving in all three axes at once? This is rotating in X, Y, and Z. When you're getting used to rotation, try to stick with only doing it in one direction. So it's only doing just a little bit. Hey, so for anyone that is showing up a little bit late, the lecture's been going for maybe like 30 minutes, but the good thing is it's all going to be recorded, and for anything that you guys missed, we are going to be sending you the recording either later tonight or tomorrow, as soon as YouTube basically tells me it's finished converting everything. So we still have about a good 30 minutes to go. And with R, kind of the same idea. R, you actually do want to use the middle button. So with R, this is a uniform scale. And a lot of you probably already heard me talk about this if I got to your grading your first project. So why do you think we would want to use this button instead of these guys? And if you guys think you might know the answer to that, like why would I maybe not want to like rely on these every time I want to make something bigger? What would be the issue? Because you can see it's doing it, right? Like, I mean, I am making it bigger, but there's a problem doing it this way. And the kind of the answer to this whole thing is actually situated right over here. I don't know if you guys can read that. It's something we're seeing in the scale properties. Now, yeah, right. So the key there is that it's not scaling uniformly. All my scale values are a little different, like 2.8, 2.2, 2.6, right? They're all a little bit off. Now, if you're making a new shape from scratch, like if you were making a cube to model something, like if I was making like a building, yeah, this is totally fine. Like I can go in there and like, yeah, the building's supposed to be taller, and it's like, it's maybe narrow, and maybe at the top there's like a slant to it. Like you can totally go in there and deform and skew shapes and stuff if that's what the model's supposed to look like. But if, let's say someone made this building, this is an amazing building, by the way. So if you guys need me for freelance work, this is what's up. But here's my incredible building, charging $50 for this thing. Let's put this thing back. I'm going to put the snap pivot point back towards the bottom. I'll talk about this with you guys in a little bit. But I'm going to do something called freeze transforms. What I'm trying to do is basically reset all my transform data back to default, where it's like zeroed out and the scale's back to 1. So the issue is, if I were to do this and make it bigger this way, what's kind of happening is I'm kind of distorting the shape, and it's because it's a non-uniform scale, the building doesn't even match the original proportions anymore. Like it's squashed, but as long as you keep these numbers the same, so if I go back to 1, so I'm just dragging over this and typing in 1, if I were to click in the middle on that middle box and scale up, this, see how it's keeping them all the same value? That's a uniform scale. So it's the same proportions, you're literally just making it bigger evenly in all 3 dimensions. That's very, very important. Later in this month, you're going to be having to scale a few things up, and if you don't do that, you will notice that the object kind of looks a little bit weird. Like circles will turn to ovals. It's not going to be good. All right, let's delete that. Okay, so I'm going to open up the character file, and then we're going to look into a couple things here. So how do we open our Maya files properly? So what I want to get you guys in the habit of doing is every time you want to work on something in Maya, the very first thing you want to do is immediately just open Maya. Don't open files by double-clicking on them. Now, if you double-click on a Maya file, this actually will open Maya, but I really want to break you guys out of that habit because this is going to be something we talk about a lot in the second week. Typically, Maya needs to be opened first because you want to give the software a chance to like load properly. It needs to load in all these plugins. There's a bunch of random tools that go with Maya that just take a little bit for them to load in. Because you probably noticed when you guys first opened the software, there was like a weird delay where it's like you can't quite do anything because it's still loading things in. And you'll see at the bottom down here sometimes it tells you like these random plugins it's still trying to generate. But typically after about 10 seconds, 15 seconds, Maya actually has loaded everything in. But once Maya is open and it's clean and empty, then you can open the file. But we want to open it from within Maya. So Maya is open. We're going to go to File, Open, and you can see we have a shortcut, right? Control O. We also have a button right there, which is the same thing, Open Scene, Control O. So you can do it either way. I'll do the shortcut. So Control O, and our little open menu pops up. I'm in a student folder, so let's just back up here. I want to go back to my LA Film School folder, Can 115. We're going to go into 1.3, 3D assets. So I'm just navigating to wherever I have that character file saved. So this is a Maya binary file. It's pretty big. It's about 250 megabytes. You're going to see why in a second. And I'm just going to simply open it. So open. Do I want to save this? As proud as I am of this empty scene here, we are not going to save it. So we're going to say don't save. A new thing popped up. It says, hey, this file is open and created by a student version of Maya. It's only used for educational purposes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're good. So just open that up. And here's our file. So what we're looking at is our Nefertiti head. We have a stand, which is very dense. There's a lot of objects here. And we have this guy. So there's quite a bit of detail here. Now, the reason why this Maya file is so big is because if you click on the head, if you zoom in, look at what the head is made up of. So you can see how it's like this spider web of all these little triangles, right? And I'm sure most of you guys probably play video games. You guys all understand like what triangulation is, like in regards to like a video game, like a triangle versus like a polygon, or like a triangle versus a quad. I don't know if you guys have ever looked into that before. I might show you this real quick if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But this is a triangulated mesh. This is scan data. So you've probably seen scan data before. You actually can get a bunch of these online for free. There's a bunch of sites that they'll just let you download scan data. So if you ever want to download random sculptures, or they have like trees and cars and random tools, you can totally go in there, download some scan data models and check them out. But let me show you the real basics here of like what a polygon is made up of. So if we go back to our cube real quick, let's just look at this guy. So I'm using Alt left. So let's just kind of go over our camera navigation again real quick. So in the viewport, Alt left is rotation and tumble. Alt middle is our side to side and up and down. Alt right and then sliding back and forth. I'm holding Alt and right mouse button, holding Alt and right mouse button, and then sliding back and forth with my mouse. That is zoom in and out. So collectively, as long as you have your finger on the Alt key, depending on what your right hand's doing with left, middle, right mouse button, and the middle mouse button, by the way, like that little wheel, that is a button. It's not just the middle mouse wheel. You can actually push down on it, and it will push in like a button. But with this guy, if you kind of think about like what a 3D shape is made of, there's actually a bunch of different components that make up a three-dimensional shape. What you guys saw in the first activity is called the object. So the object is this whole thing. Like when I click on this head, that's an object. But I bet a couple of you, just by kind of clicking around and still being a little clumsy navigating, probably ended up in one of these guys by mistake, where you'd like by clicking kind of randomly and you thought you were moving the camera, you may have noticed that out of nowhere your object looks different. Like things are like lighting up and it's not the full object. So if you ever ended up in any of these modes, what you had done is you had accidentally held down your right mouse button. So I didn't hold down Alt. So if I hold Alt and right, I'm doing a zoom. But if you just hold down right mouse button and you're not doing Alt, it's completely different. This is a marking menu, and marking menus, just by their like in the default one, will allow you to go between different components. So an edge component are these guys. These are edges. So edges are the lines between the faces. They're pretty straightforward. I mean, you can rotate them. You can do whatever you want with them. You can click on multiple edges at once. I could take the top, click on the edges, hit R, scale it in. Yeah, no worries. Oh, that's actually good you're doing the update. We should be done by then anyway. I love how you have like a countdown. So you can scale in components, you can move them around. If I right click and go to face, so I'm just holding right mouse button down and going to face, here's a face. Face is like the flat face of each side, right? I can move this in and out, I can move it up, down, you can rotate it, just like all your other tools you've been using. Right click, vertex. So vertex are going to be the points between all the edges and faces. So all those things make up the 3D shape. But the kind of interesting thing here, I'm just going to click on all these faces and delete them because I kind of want to go back to just like a cap, like this is basically just a plane. There's no volume to it now. You might be wondering why on this model, why is it broken up into triangles? Like why is it not a quad? And a quad, where is it? There we go. A quad is a four-sided face. Why is this not a triangle here, but why is that a triangle over there? So when you're modeling something, typically when you guys get to a modeling class, you will be modeling in quads. Like this is made up of quads. It's very easy to look at a model and you can see there's something called edge flow. Like you can just tell the way it's constructed. It's very grid-like. It's easy to understand how this is built. This, when you start getting into triangles, it gets a little more chaotic because it doesn't necessarily have the same flow. Now, even though typically you guys will be modeling in quads like this, anytime you guys make an image and you're creating like a render, which is like your 2D image from Maya, which we're going to do later in the month, renders want to be using triangulated meshes. So with this guy right here, let's say that, let me actually duplicate this over. So I'm going to have two of these guys. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to hold down right mouse button. I'm going to go to vertex. And I'm going to drag over the two vertices here. And I'm going to use W to translate, and we're going to move it up. Now I want you to see what happened here when I did that. Now notice how it was flat. As soon as I pulled these up, what happened to the plane? See how like Maya is sort of creating this like crease right here? Like it thinks if I pull those points up, there should be a crease running down the middle, sort of like you folding a piece of paper, right? But, let me delete this. Watch this. I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm duplicating the one I just did. Here's my creased one. This, I'm going to manually draw the crease. So what this one's doing is, let me try to draw the triangle for you. I'm going to use something called the multi-cut. And in case you guys are curious how to get to these modeling tools, because I know a couple of you were probably playing around with some of those like modeling tutorials I have in the first activity under the dive deeper, like the soda can. I don't usually go through the menus at the top. I've been getting a lot better about using the marking menu. So if I use Shift right click by itself is this. If you do Shift right click over an object, see how it brings up these modeling tools? I'm going to use something called a multi-cut, and I'm just going to like manually draw the edge because I want you guys to visually see the triangle. Like this is what happened when I pulled the corners up. It thinks there's an edge right here. I'm just drawing that for you manually so you kind of visually know what just happened. This one, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw the edge the other direction. I'm going to go from here to here. Hit enter. So I don't know if this is going to make a lot of sense, but what I want you guys to see is that when we started this thing, when I folded it, I know I put the edge there myself, but that edge didn't exist until I put it there. And depending on where Maya puts the crease, you can get completely different results. These were both the same object. If I put them back together, and if you actually look at like the wireframe, you can see that like all the corners still line up. Like this really is the same mesh. Like they are pretty much identical. The issue is that because it's creasing it in a different direction, you get a different result. This is actually why things are triangulated for video games, because anytime you have a quad, let me get rid of the edge, and oh, that didn't work very well. See if this one's a little bit nicer. Nope, that's fine. Anytime you don't have an edge and it's just like a four-sided face, you leave it up to the software to figure out which version of this quad is it trying to create. Is that four-sided face supposed to be this, or is it supposed to turn into this? So there's like a difference in what it'll do. Now, thankfully, if the face is really flat, like if we come over here and look at this guy right here, if they're really flat, it doesn't matter which way it cuts the triangle. It's still going to look the same because it's a flat surface. It just gets a little trickier when you start working with faces that are curving, which has kind of happened on this model right here, because then it does have to make triangles just to like create the geometry properly. I know this is probably a little intense and kind of like complicated maybe for the first lecture, but I just want you guys to kind of have that kind of brewing in the back of your mind. This is what a polygon is. It's typically a quad. They turn into triangles when we create our images. And then those triangles and polygons are made up of other components called edges, vertexes, or vertices, and faces. And eventually we'll talk about UVs when we get to shading and lighting too. That's something else. Okay. First lecture, and we're getting into questionable math already in Maya. All right. So in here, what I want to do is try to make our first camera, and we're going to try to line stuff up for the reference. So I'm going to go back in the folder, and we're going to load up, let's do the angled one, because this is probably actually the harder one of the two. So I'm going to load this up, and if you guys have a second monitor, you can just totally throw it on your second monitor. I have one off to the side, but you guys can't see that. So I'm going to scale in Maya at the top. We're just going to scale this in as small as I can, like about like that. And I'm going to grab the edge of Maya and just pull this in so I can kind of see what I'm doing and this still at the same time. Because we're trying to match this image. Okay, so what we need to do, if you go back to the documentation, is we are sitting right here. We got the character file open. We're looking at that image actually right now. We want to make a new camera. We're going to rename it because we want to keep our stuff organized. And then we're going to turn on the resolution gate, resolution gate is this little box that's kind of going around the camera. See how this kind of has like a light gray color? We're going to turn that on, set the resolution properly in the render settings. We're going to do all that. And then hopefully we're going to get really close to matching the reference. And honestly, once we get that locked down, we'll probably lock the camera just to make sure we don't move it accidentally. And then we're going to repeat that for the other camera. And once we've got both cameras working, we're going to save the file and we're done. So let's try it out. Now, the first thing is, how do we make a camera? And how do we know what camera we're currently using? So at the moment, this viewport that we're looking at, this actually is a camera. You may not realize it at first because it just seems like this is sort of your workspace, but this really is a camera. You're looking through a camera the whole time. At the bottom, you'll see it says persp. This is short for perspective. And if you look in the outliner, I bet a bunch of you guys already noticed, it was also labeled right there, persp. Top, front, side. There's our two objects. There's something called light sets. This isn't too important, but these guys are all very important, and we can see them in the project. So the perspective camera, you actually can tell these are cameras too because they have these little nifty camera icons right next to it. So we're in perspective. Perspective is your default camera. But what are these guys? You can actually still get to these pretty easily if you want to use them. So over here on the left, right where you guys were hitting that button to open and close the outliner, there's a single viewport right here, single perspective view. There's a quad view, and there's a split view. I use a split view a lot. So here's quad view. Watch what it does to my viewport when I hit the second button. Now notice how we still have the perspective camera here. It's very tiny, but this is a viewport. This is my perspective. And notice how we have 4 viewports, all the same buttons at the top. They all have their own wireframe controls, like 4, 5, 4 and 5 over here. They all have their own, resolution gate buttons, whatever, ambient occlusion. You can't really see them because they're getting cut off, but it's all there. So why do you think we'd ever want to do this? Well, what you're seeing is sort of like what you do for like architectural visualization. Like if you're working in AutoCAD or you're creating an apartment building and you want to get you have blueprints from like the side, the top, the front. You can use those and line stuff up really well. So my side view is an orthographic camera looking at the side. Here's my front. I'm just using Alt right mouse to back up, so you can see that. Top is, of course, coming from the top. And you can click on any of these guys. You can move in any of the viewports. It'll update. If I move this way, you can see it updates properly. So I really like using these guys when I'm modeling something. Now, there is another one below that called Split View. This is the one that most of you guys are going to be using in this class. So here's Split. Split is kind of the same idea where it's still making another camera. It's the front, and I still have my perspective over here. But the cool thing about the Split View is this allows me to work in perspective still. So I can still click on stuff, move objects around, whatever I got to do. But I'm going to use the other viewport to create my camera. So it's almost like if you were, let's say you own your own camera, you're going onto a location for a photo shoot. You want to be able to physically move around the camera and put the actor in the right position, move props around. But you also want to see what the camera sees when you set it up. That's basically what we're doing. What does the camera see? And then this is us moving around, doing our regular work. So they're two different things. So on this side, currently we're using front. We want to make our new camera. So currently I don't have any other cameras aside from those default ones that come with Maya. So how do we do this? It's super easy. At the top of Maya under Create, if you hit this button, there's a bunch of things we can make. Polygons, which is the same thing on the shelf. I can make volume primitives. There's lights. We'll do that later. But for today, it's how do we make a camera? It's right here. We have 3 different types of cameras: single point, 2-point, and 3-point. I do talk about these in some of my dive deeper videos. You guys do not need to make these. You're only doing the first one, a single point camera. It's the easiest one. So we're going to click. There it is. Then notice how it showed up in the outliner. So you can see it's in the scene somewhere. But where is it? Remember how, like I was earlier showing you guys, if you click on something and hit F, it'll zoom in the camera to whatever you're selecting? Click on the camera, hit F in any viewer. Like, it will show you where the camera is, because it is in here. Here's me hitting F. There's the camera. You can actually see the little camera icon. Where the heck are we? Right? We're in like the black abyss over here. Well, let's back up. That's where the camera is located. The camera is shoved inside of the pedestal, this little stand that thing's sitting on. That's why we couldn't see it. We just didn't know it was under that guy. Now, why did it form here? Because this location right here, you can't really, let me actually hide this real quick so you can see this. I'm just going to click on the stand and hit H. So H for hide. See what's going on right here? This grid, there's also a button. You can turn it on and off. This is the center of your 3D world. So it just happens to be the bottom of the stand was sitting on the center of the 3D world. And that's where things are going to keep popping up every time I make something. Not a big deal once you know that, but that's why it was there. So let's hit H again to hide it or bring it back. I'm going to hit 5 to go back to shaded mode. So I'm just going to click on the camera. Now, you have a couple ways you can move these around. You can just click on a camera and move this around. Like, you can totally do that. I think what is going to be better for you guys is to move around through the camera like you're doing right here in the viewport. Like, you want to be able to look through it and do this to get it in the right spot. So the issue is this viewport right here. I want this to be that guy. This camera needs to be this thing. So in this viewport, if you go up to the panels menu, you can actually swap out this camera for any of the other ones you have in your project. So if I go to perspective, see how I have a couple options here? I could pick perspective camera. It just is kind of weird because now it's literally the same camera on both viewports. It's odd. If I go to panels and do orthographic, you can see, okay, there's my orthographic cameras. We saw those earlier, right? They're there if I need to swap them out. But really what we want to do is camera 1. This is the one we made. So I'm going to click it. You see, again, it's in the stand. But how do I back that up? How do I move this backwards out of the stand? So remember, like when you're looking through a camera, if you use Alt right mouse button, that'll back it up. It's the same thing. Just in this viewer through the camera, use Alt right mouse button and keep clicking and dragging. And eventually it will pop out. And you actually can see it right here. As I move it back, it's just sliding in 3D space. And eventually, if I go back far enough, we'll see the stand. Alt middle, we're going to move up. There's our head. Now, let's just say that we're struggling getting our camera in the right spot. Or we do something where we're like, I don't know what happened. My camera is way out in the middle of nowhere. I feel like I'm just struggling to get this to do what I want. Like, how do I fix it? Click on any object in the outliner, like the Nefertiti head, hit F in this camera's viewport. F will pop the camera back to where it's supposed to be. So it will always zoom in to whatever you're selecting as long as you hit F over the viewport of the camera and have something selected. It's a very easy way to adjust the camera's position if it just got wildly off the mark and it's out in the middle of nowhere. Super easy to fix. So again, use F. F is in focus. Okay, so from here, once you do that, Alt middle or Alt left is just allowing me to kind of rotate around the head. Alt right, Alt middle. It should be pretty easy. Now, the problem that we're going to run into is, see how in the reference I got this like gray box around it? When you're looking through a camera, you have to make sure that you understand what the camera sees. Now, see how when I make this little viewport bigger or smaller, it's kind of like expanding the space around it right here? The camera doesn't necessarily see this. We just haven't turned on the resolution gate to know what the camera is going to see. At the top of your viewport for your camera, actually, let's also name it too real quick, because camera 1's kind of a crappy name. We want to call it character angled cam. So we're going to do that. I'm going to double click on the camera right in the outliner. You can see as soon as I double click, it's like, hey, you want to rename something? You bet I do. Character angled cam, right? So it's already renamed. You can see it updates down here. So now if you were to go through here and look for the camera, it'll show up with a different name right here. So that will also update. So now I know exactly which one I'm looking at. But to turn on the resolution gate, at the top of your viewport, there's two buttons that are really similar right next to the grid. This is the resolution gate. If you put your mouse over it, it will tell you which one it is. Boom. Now notice how it's being cut out a little bit. I just want to expand this out so you can see this. Oh, that's really tiny. There we go. I had to close the channel box so you can even see this. This is the resolution gate. Now notice how for this, it doesn't match. This is a portrait, right? It's a taller aspect ratio. This is a wider aspect ratio. How do we fix this? So in the videos for 1.3, I kind of go through all of this. Even though we did turn on the resolution gate and we have that sort of boundary so I know what the camera is going to see, I need to fix the dimensions. I need to set the resolution to 720 by 1080 in the render settings. And then once we do that, then we can line it up. So let's try it out. Where are the render settings? The render settings are at the top of Maya right here. So when you see that little kind of bluish teal ball, it's the one right to the left. Click it. We're in the render settings. Now, we're going to be in here a lot more later in the month, but for right now, all we have to do is make sure in the very first tab for common, you're going to scroll down until you get to the area where we see image size. This is where you define what resolution you're working with. So you guys, I'm sure to some degree have like used Photoshop a little bit. In Photoshop, you've probably at some point made a new image, like you've made a new document. You know how in Photoshop you have to tell the software what size of a document you want to make? Like I'm going to do a 4K wide by 2K tall, or I'm doing a perfect square, like a 1000 by 1000. That's basically what we're doing here. We're just telling the software what dimensions we need. So when you say okay, so Aspen, you're asking how do I get the outliner to add to the screen? Over here on the left, there's a button right below these three. It's the bottom one. Hit that, and that will pop it out. So this is a toggle on and off for the outliner. If this doesn't work for whatever reason, go up to your workspace and then reset the workspace, because sometimes the outliner will get torn off and it's in a different location. But if you reset your workspace, it'll pop back. But it's right there. You guys can also get to it right here in the Windows menu, but I think this is that's a lot of work, like moving my hand up, clicking, and scrolling down. Like, I don't need to burn that many calories. So we're going to stick with the easy one right here on the left. Okay. Now in the render settings, right here, we're going to set it to what it says in the documentation, 720 by 1080. So I'm talking about 720 width, 1080 height. You don't have to use a preset, just simply type it in right here, 720. See how it already changed as soon as I did that? So you can see this is directly affecting the resolution gate. 720 by 540, nope, 720 by 1080. And as soon as you do that, you're going to notice that immediately this thing looks like it's the same type of resolution. It's not, the camera's not in the right spot, but you can tell, like, at least this looks right, right? Like we're making some progress through this thing. And that's pretty much it. So you guys will probably be able to figure that out pretty easily. I do want to point out one thing real quick, though, you want to be careful about. Sometimes, depending on what you click through here, because I know a few people end up hitting some of these checkboxes or hitting this button to device aspect ratio, and you're just going to be curious, clicking around. Be very careful that this number doesn't change. We've had a couple projects before where I'll notice that this number is correct, but this accidentally gets changed. A pixel aspect ratio, if you change it to something different just by accident, this will throw off all of your images later in the month. This is sort of like stretching the image or squashing the image. I think if you do something like 3, yeah, see what it's doing? It's like basically breaking the thing. Even though you type this in right, this is way different. So it's like multiplying the width by 3 and destroying the render. So we're going to make sure that is at 1, and these are at 720 by 1080. Just be kind of careful about that. Once this is set, you're good to go. When you set that in your project, it will work with every camera. So you don't have to do that again when you get to the second camera. It's already set up. So let's try to line it up. I'm going to click on the head. We're going to hit F to zoom in, right? I'm going to click off the head so I don't get blinded by the green light. And we're going to Alt right mouse button. We're going to back up. Now, I'm just going to kind of critique my way through this so you sort of understand how I look at something like this. I'm backing up. What I would say is I'm seeing too much of the top of the pedestal or the stand, right? That's more of a glancing angle. So that tells me my camera is too high and I'm aiming down. I'm tilted down from above. So I'm going to use Alt middle. Let's lower the camera. Now, as I get down, see, I know it's like it's going off the screen, but see how like the perspective is like kind of close? Like we're kind of getting that same glancing angle, but I need to tilt my head up. So as I'm dropping it down with Alt middle, I'm also going to Alt left to tilt it up. So I'm kind of like bouncing around between Alt middle, left, and right, just trying to nudge it into position. And I'm looking at like the space on the side right here. And eventually, like I can even use the nose as a guide. See how the nose doesn't quite clear the cheek? Look how much cheek is visible there. Alt left, let's turn it right there, like that. Alt middle, and maybe up a little bit, in very slightly. You can kind of see, I hope this makes sense what I'm kind of doing. I'm just kind of like critiquing my way through and trying to look at any clues as far as negative space, the way the nose lines up with the cheek, how much we're seeing on the top of the stand. I'm doing as much kind of nitpicking as possible, and I'm going to nudge it into position. Because you guys are new to Maya, it's going to feel like it takes you way longer than it did for me right here because you're still learning to walk in the software. And that's why we have this project set up for you. I want you guys to like struggle a little bit trying to move around because that's how you get better. You're just trying to learn how to do those basic movements and simple motions to line something up. And then as you do this more and more throughout the month, pretty soon this moving stuff around Maya is going to be so natural to you that you don't really even think about it. It's going to just be like another arm. Like it's a very natural thing for you to do. So once you get it lined up and you feel like you're in a good spot, the only thing I want to recommend you guys do is lock the camera. So let me bring this back again. We'll pop the outliner back open. Let's even get the channel box back. So I'm bringing back everything kind of like we had earlier. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. I think it looks good. If I was a student, I'd say I probably deserve an A, I would guess, for this. But eventually, We want to make sure we don't move the camera, because it's pretty easy to do is you'll kind of forget that this is a camera you set up, and then at some point what's going to happen is when you're doing another activity, you'll like move this camera thinking you're in perspective, and before you know it, you just messed up your camera that you spent all this time getting in position. Okay, let's put it back. Oh, and by the way, you can undo camera movements. If you're looking at your keyboard, if you ever want to it's a kind of a cool trick. Let's say that you move something accidentally and you want to undo it. If you look at your keyboard on the P key, see those two brackets next to P, where it's like the left and right bracket button? That's actually an undo and redo camera movement. So if I do the left bracket, it'll step back through. I'm kind of using left and right. It's popping through my camera movements right now. And I can kind of eventually end up on the one that I want to use. So that's the left and right bracket next to the P key on your keyboard. But what I want to show you guys real quick before we get out of here is this camera is in a pretty good spot. Now see how like I have all this transform data and it's very easy for me to move this accidentally. Look right at the top of this camera. See how we have all these buttons like the resolution gate, like I have that grid button. There's one right there that has a little camera icon with a padlock on it. Hit this button and I want you to watch what happens over here. And I have the camera selected too because I want you guys to see what it does in the channel box. When I hit it, see how this button being turned on and off is adding this like gray color here? It's locking the camera's translate and rotational values, not scale. So like I could still make the camera icon bigger. Like if you are having a hard time seeing the camera in 3D, you could still go to this and like say, I want to make the camera icon 5, and it's easier to see it. But the translate and rotate are locked. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to break this. I'm going to like hold Alt, and I'm going to use every button possible to move this camera. I am furiously clicking, trying to break it. I'm Alt left clicking. I want it to break. See how it works here? Fine. Not here. This is because it's locked. You cannot move the camera until you unlock it, and then you can move it around again. So that little guy right there is going to save you guys a lot of grief, because we have a lot of people that at some point will accidentally move it, and their beautiful composition has been ruined. But that's one of the cameras, and really all we would do is repeat that again for the front cam. So you're still going to, go up here, just like before, make a new camera. You're going to name it, right? You want to look through it so you can see what the camera sees, and you're going to try to line it up with this guy. This one's a lot easier. It's literally just a front shot looking directly at the head. And once you get both close, obviously make sure both cameras are locked, and you can save it. So when you want to save your Maya file, it's pretty easy. Let's see, it wants me to call it character cam. So I'm going to pretend like we're done. We're going to go to File, Save Scene As. By the way, don't feel like when you're saving files, don't wait until the end. If you're making progress through something, save it midway through it. Don't wait till the end, because if it crashes or if something happens, like your computer restarts, your cat jumps on the keyboard, you could potentially lose a lot of information. So save periodically. So I'm going to do Save Scene As, and figure out where you want to save it. I'm just going to do mine on the desktop right now because I don't want to override anything I already did. But I'll go to my desktop. I'm going to name it character cam, just like it says, charactercam.mb. All right. Yep, that looks great. Hit Save As, hit Continue, and you'll notice there it is in the desktop. That one's already done. I didn't do the other camera, but I think you guys kind of get the idea. Like we're just saving the file when we're done working on it. And you're just repeating that for the environment. And the environment one, I'm not going to do too much here because we're going a little over time. But I just want you to at least see what the environment looks like so you have a rough idea. And if you guys have any questions, by the way, let me know. But here's what the environment looks like. Okay, this is the environment. It's still got the same split view. Let me just go to a single perspective so you don't see that quite yet. Here it is. Now, if you guys open this up, if you see this where it's black, this seems to happen a lot for some reason with the new file. I have to figure out what's going on. This is easy to fix though. It's just a shading issue. If you go to the perspective camera's shading menu, just come down here and turn on backface culling, and that will fix it. It's a trick basically where you're supposed to be able to see through the back wall so you can see the interior without having to physically move the camera in the room to do something. You guys have actually probably seen this before. Like if you guys have played like a lot of video games, like if you ever moved your character in a weird spot where they're clearly not supposed to be. I did this a lot in Skyrim, where I would like wedge myself in a wall somewhere awkwardly, and it looks like I'm like seeing through the wall. Because what happened is you're actually behind something that's single-sided, and you're seeing through the back side of the geometry. It happens a lot in video games anytime you end up going into a spot of the level you're not supposed to be in. But there it is. So all you're doing is making a camera and figuring out how you want to compositionally line up your shot for the balcony. So you could do like something really symmetrical. You could totally go in here. Come on. I probably have to close out of Maya. My render settings are not loading. If you ever see something like weird like this happen where the render settings, like you open them up and they're not showing up, just close out of Maya, reopen it. It'll show up again. That's been happening recently. But you can go in here and like do like a really close shot. You could do like a top down. You could have like a 3/4 where you're at an angle where you kind of get some of the windows in the view, a distant shot. The cameras also have focal length adjustments. So like if you did have a camera in here, you could also play around with focal length, which is basically a zoom. So if I were to look through my camera, let me back it up and spin it around here. You could try changing the focal length, which is in the attribute editor. So I have the camera selected. It's right there. Focal length is a zoom, basically your zoom control. If you zoom it in a lot, like 120 millimeter, you can see how things look a little bit different. See how they're kind of like flatter? They're like we were defaulting at 35 earlier. This is a 120 now. If I do a low focal length, like a 15, this is what a low focal length looks like. This is actually called a wide angle view or a wide field of view. See how it looks kind of like very exaggerated perspective lines? That's a low focal length. This one's actually really cool, by the way, because if you guys start getting into like character animation, I'm sure you guys have all seen like Ratatouille. They have a lot of those like low camera shots where you're like kind of on ground level with some of the characters, and you're supposed to be looking up at like all the other people walking around. This is a really cool way to exaggerate the height of something, because if you have a low focal length, it almost makes everything around you look monstrously tall. It's a really cool trick to like exaggerate perspective lines to like change the way something feels, like the scale of something. Not saying you guys need to do that, but I think that's always kind of interesting. And I have a couple of videos that talk about focal length if you're interested. But I just want you guys to have fun in this one and see what you can do. Honestly, I think that's kind of it, guys. Does anybody have any questions about this week's activities? If I haven't got to your 1.1 yet, I will be doing that tomorrow. I've tried to leave at least some feedback on everybody's post, but I'll get to that tomorrow if I haven't. And of course, the 1.3 is going to be due Sunday. You're just turning in the 2 Maya files with your cameras. And for the live session, all you guys got to do is at the bottom, mark as complete. All this does is it just lets me know that you either participated in the live session with me like today, or you watched the recording tomorrow. I just like to understand who's watching it and who isn't, so that way I can, if someone didn't watch it, I can point them to the video, if they ran into any issues with the last assignment. But we did it. First meeting out of the way. Cool. Well, thanks, guys, for hanging out with me today. I'm looking forward to seeing how everybody's first projects come out. And then later in the month, if you guys really do a good job with the cameras, you are going to be doing stuff like this. Eventually, you will be taking your cameras and making your own lighting setups. You're going to be a photographer and trying to design your own photo shoot. think you're going to have a lot of fun with this. But this is kind of the first step to that. You're just creating your cameras for that activity. Cool. Everyone have a good night. And I will either talk to you later in the week or I'll talk to you at the next live session.